Picture this. Someone walks up to you, a coworker, a family member, a stranger online, and they say something designed to cut you. Maybe it's an insult dressed up as a joke. Maybe it's a direct attack on your intelligence, your choices, your character. And in that exact moment, your heart rate spikes. Your jaw tightens. Your mind floods with 1,000 things you want to say back. And here's where most people make the worst mistake of their lives. They open their mouth. They react. They snap back. They defend themselves. They escalate. And in doing so, they hand that other person something priceless, total, complete control over their mind. But what if you didn't? What if the next time someone tried to light you on fire, you simply didn't burn? That's not weakness. That's not cowardice. That is one of the most powerful things a human being can do. And it has a name. It's called Stoicism. And for over 2,000 years, it has been the secret weapon of emperors, generals, philosophers, and every person who ever refused to let another human being steal their peace. Today, I'm giving you 12 rules, pulled directly from Stoic philosophy, that will make you virtually unshakable when people try to provoke you. By the end of this video, you will see provocations differently, respond differently, and walk through the world like someone who cannot be rattled. Let's get into it. Rule 1. An insult is a mirror, not a window. The first thing you need to understand, and I mean deeply understand, not just intellectually agree with, is this. When someone insults you, they are not telling you about yourself. They are telling you about themselves. Think about it. When you are genuinely at peace, when your life is full, your confidence is grounded, your relationships are healthy, do you feel the urge to attack other people? Do you feel the need to tear someone down, mock them publicly, belittle their work, sneer at their choices? No, you don't. Because people who are thriving have no interest in destruction. The ancient Stoics understood this completely. Epictetus, who was born a slave and became one of the most influential philosophers in history, wrote extensively about this. He taught that every aggressive act toward another person originates not from strength, but from a deep and desperate kind of inner poverty. The person who attacks you is not powerful. They are suffering. They are angry at something. Their circumstances, their failures, their sense of inadequacy. And they are redirecting that anger outward because they do not have the tools to process it inward. An insult, when you look at it this way, is not a weapon. It is a symptom. It is the verbal equivalent of someone bleeding on you and expecting you to feel guilty about it. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who ruled one of the most powerful empires in history and still sat down every night to write philosophical reflections in his private journal, put it plainly. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. He wasn't saying this to become cynical. He was saying it so that when it happened, he would not be surprised, offended, or destabilized. He understood what most people never grasp. Behavior that comes from internal pain is not personal. It was never about you. It was always about them. So the next time someone lobs an insult at you, before you react, pause and ask yourself this one question. What kind of pain would make a person say something like that? The answer will immediately shift you from the position of victim to the position of observer. And from that position, you cannot be hurt. Rule 2. You choose. What words mean, here is a thought that will rearrange something in your mind if you let it. Words have no power over you that you do not give them. This is not a motivational poster. This is a philosophical and neurological truth. A word, any word, no matter how harsh, is just vibrations of air that travel into your ears and become electrical signals in your brain. The meaning you attach to those signals? That's entirely yours. That's entirely chosen. Epictetus, in his foundational work, The Enchiridion, opened with one of the most important distinctions in all of philosophy. Some things are in our control, and some things are not. What is in our control? Our judgments, our responses, our interpretations. What is not? Everything else, including what other people say. When someone calls you a failure, or stupid, or worthless, or any other word designed to wound, they are not defining your reality. They are offering you an interpretation of yourself, like a salesperson handing you a product at the door. You are under no obligation to buy it. Think of verbal attacks as social noise. Noise is everywhere. Traffic, construction, a TV left on in the background. But you do not absorb every sound as meaningful information. You filter. You choose what deserves your attention and what gets ignored. You can do the exact same thing with words directed at you. Someone calls you incompetent at a meeting? That's noise. Someone tells you you'll never succeed? Noise. An online stranger spends 20 minutes writing a vicious comment about your content. Loud noise from someone who needs to be heard. The Stoics called the practice of examining your responses provocation, self-attention or watchfulness of the mind. It means developing the habit of catching the moment between stimulus and response. Between someone saying something cruel and you reacting to it, there is a gap. Most people never notice the gap because it happens so fast. But Stoic training is about expanding that gap, making it wider, giving yourself more room inside it, until you can step in and consciously choose what happens next. Your mind is not a public space. Not everyone gets access. You get to decide what words are allowed to carry weight inside your own head. Rule 3. Reacting is giving away your mind. This one needs to land hard. So I want to be direct with you. Every time you react impulsively to a provocation, every time you lose your temper, fire back without thinking, get defensive, or let someone else's mood dictate your behavior, you are not expressing power. You are demonstrating that a stranger or an adversary has more control over your inner state than you do. That is not a small thing. That is one of the most significant forms of surrender a person can make. The Stoics had a concept for this. Hegemonikon, the ruling faculty of the mind. It is the seat of your reason, your will, your self-direction. And the whole of Stoic philosophy is built around one central idea. Protect that. Guard it. Do not let anything outside of you reach in and take the wheel. When you snap at someone who insults you, you have let them take the wheel. When you lie awake at 2 a.m. replaying an argument and mentally drafting responses, you have let them take the wheel. When you change your behavior, your plans, your mood, your day, because of what someone said, you have handed your hegemonikon to someone who may not deserve a single second of your mental energy. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Notice he doesn't say you can control events. He says you have power over your mind. That's the only battleground that matters. The provocateur, whether consciously or not, is fishing. They cast out an insult like a hook and wait to see if you bite. The moment you react, the moment you let anger or defensiveness or hurt take over, you have bitten. You are now on their line. They are pulling you. The Stoic response is not to fight the hook. It is to stop being a fish, to recognize the hook for what it is and simply let it pass. Not out of weakness, out of sovereignty. Because here is the ultimate truth. A person who cannot be provoked cannot be controlled. And a person who cannot be controlled is, in the most meaningful sense, free. Rule 4. The 3-second rule. That changes everything. Neuroscience has finally caught up with what Stoic philosophers knew 2,000 years ago. When you perceive a threat, social, physical, emotional, your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, fires immediately. Within milliseconds, cortisol and adrenaline flood your system. Your heart rate increases. Your prefrontal cortex, the rational, deliberate, wise part of your brain, gets temporarily knocked offline. And you are now operating on instinct, not intelligence. This is called an amygdala hijack. And when it happens in the context of a verbal provocation, it turns articulate, intelligent, calm people into reactive, defensive, regrettable versions of themselves. The antidote is what I call the 3-second rule. Before you respond to anything that provokes you, anything, you impose a mandatory 3-second delay. You don't fill it with thought, necessarily. You don't rehearse your comeback. You simply create a gap. You breathe. You let the initial chemical surge begin to recede. You give your prefrontal cortex time to come back online. 3 seconds doesn't sound like much. But in the economy of emotional response, 3 seconds is an enormous amount of time. It is enough to shift the locus of control from your reactive brain back to your reasoning mind. It is enough to ask, is this worth responding to? And if so, how do I want to respond? Seneca, in his essay on anger, wrote that the greatest cure for anger is delay. Not suppression, delay. You are not pretending the anger doesn't exist. You are simply refusing to let it act before you have had a chance to think. Practice this, deliberately, in low-stakes situations first. Someone cuts you off in traffic. 3-second pause before the horn. Someone sends a mildly annoying email. 3-second pause before you type. Someone makes a thoughtless comment. 3-second pause before the first word leaves your mouth. You are training a new default. And over time, that 3 seconds becomes automatic. It becomes your first response to any provocation. And in that space, you discover something remarkable. Most provocations, when not immediately fed with reaction, simply dissolve. Rule 5. See every provocation as a test. You can win. One of the most powerful reframes in the entire Stoic tradition is this. Difficulty is not something happening to you. It is something happening for you. Every moment of provocation, every snide comment, every unfair attack, every attempt to destabilize you, is a live test of the character you are in the process of building. And the question is not whether you'll face it. The question is, what grade will you give yourself when it's over? Think of it this way. If you spend months in the gym building strength, and then avoid every situation that requires you to be strong, what was the point? You don't get to call yourself strong. You have the capacity for strength, but no evidence of it. Character is the same. You don't know whether your patience is real until it is tested. You don't know whether your equanimity is genuine until someone tries to shatter it. Provocations are not obstacles to your growth. They are the field where your growth gets proven. Marcus Aurelius loved this framing. He wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This is not just poetic. It's a practical instruction. The person who is trying to upset you is, without knowing it, giving you the most valuable thing in the world. The chance to demonstrate who you are. Every time you maintain your composure when someone is trying to make you lose it, you win. Not just in the moment. You win at the deep level of self-concept. You prove to yourself, at the biological and psychological level, that you are the kind of person who doesn't break. That belief, once earned through repeated real-world evidence, becomes armor. So the next time someone provokes you, don't dread it. Meet it. Think, this is the test. Let me show myself and the world who I actually am. Rule 6. Breathe before you battle. This rule sounds almost embarrassingly simple, but do not underestimate it. When you are in the middle of a provocation, your body is the first battlefield. Long before you form a word, your chest tightens, your breathing gets shallow, your muscles contract. You are, in a very literal sense, preparing for combat. The breath is the only part of your autonomic nervous system, the system that controls your body's stress responses, that you can consciously control in real time. And that gives it extraordinary power. When you shift your focus from the words being thrown at you to the physical sensation of your breath, the expansion of your chest, the rhythm of inhale and exhale, two things happen immediately. First, you activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which counteracts the fight or flight response. Your heart rate begins to slow. Your cortisol begins to drop. Your prefrontal cortex starts to come back online. Second, and perhaps more importantly, you physically relocate your attention. You move it away from the external noise, the insult, the attack, the provocateur, and anchor it into your own body in the present moment. And from that anchored place, you are far harder to move. This is not just modern mindfulness advice. Epictetus spoke about this in terms of prosoche, that same watchful self-attention, which always begins with awareness of one's own inner state. You cannot respond well to the external world if you are not first in command of your internal one. Here's a simple technique you can use immediately. When provoked, take one slow, deliberate breath. In for 4 counts, hold for 2, out for 6. That longer exhale specifically signals safety to your nervous system. It is the physiological equivalent of telling your body, "We are not in danger. Stand down." You will be amazed at how much a single breath can change what comes out of your mouth, or what doesn't. Rule 7. Nothing gets in without your permission. Marcus Aurelius had a phrase he returned to again and again in his meditations. The inner citadel. The idea of the mind as a fortified space, a place that the chaos of the external world could besiege but never breach, as long as the inhabitant chose to keep the gates closed. This is one of the most empowering ideas in all of Stoic philosophy. And here is why. Hostility, criticism, provocation, insult, at their most fundamental level. These are just external events. They are things that happen outside of you. The wind blows, a car honks, a person speaks harshly. These events are, in themselves, neutral. They have no valence, no meaning, no power. The only way any of it gets inside you, the only way it causes pain, anger, shame, or anxiety, is if you allow it through the gate. This is not toxic positivity. This is not pretending that words don't hurt or that cruelty doesn't exist. It is recognizing, with clear eyes, that you are the final authority on what is allowed to affect your inner state. Other people can knock on the door of your mind all day long, but opening the door, that is always your choice. Epictetus was emphatic about this. No one can hurt you without your consent. He lived this. As a slave, he had almost nothing. His body was not even legally his own. But he recognized that his mind was entirely his own, and that no master, no matter how cruel, could reach inside it without his permission. That understanding was his freedom. What does this look like practically? It means developing the habit of narrating your experience instead of being swept into it. Instead of thinking, "That insult hurt me," which frames you as passive recipient, you think, "I notice that comment is trying to trigger a pain response." The shift from "that hurt me" to "I notice that was designed to hurt me" is the shift from victim to sovereign. You are the gatekeeper of your own mind. Act like it. Rule 8. The best revenge is being nothing like them. Marcus Aurelius wrote this, and it is one of the most quietly devastating things ever put on paper. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Read that again. Not to defeat them, not to humiliate them, not to prove them wrong or rise above them, or let success be your vengeance. The best revenge, the only revenge that matters, is simply to be a fundamentally different kind of person than the one who tried to harm you. Because here is what retaliation actually does. It makes you more like your attacker. When you respond to cruelty with cruelty, to pettiness with pettiness, to aggression with aggression, you have lowered yourself into their frequency. You have agreed, implicitly, that this is the level on which human beings operate. And now you're both down there. Whereas when you refuse to retaliate, when you respond to an insult with silence, or grace, or calm, or even genuine compassion, you are doing something that costs the other person nothing and costs you everything. You are choosing to be better in a moment when being worse would have been easy. That choice is character. And character, built slowly, deliberately, through 1,000 small choices in difficult moments, is the most powerful thing a human being can possess. This does not mean you are a doormat. It does not mean you cannot set limits or address genuine harm. It means you get to decide whether your response will make you more like the person who hurt you or more like the person you are trying to become. Every provocation is that decision. Live in real time. And every time you choose elevation over retaliation, you are not just protecting your peace, you are literally constructing your character, one decision at a time. Rule 9. Build a self-worth that no one can touch. Here is the uncomfortable truth that most personal development content will not say to you directly. If someone else's words can shatter your sense of worth, your sense of worth was not really yours in the first place. This is not harsh. This is liberating. Most of us build our self-concept out of external materials. Compliments and achievements, likes and approval, titles and recognition. And because those materials come from the outside, they can also be taken from the outside, which means your self-worth is perpetually hostage to whoever happens to have the most influence over you in any given moment. The Stoics called this condition living according to externals, letting the opinions of others, the fluctuations of fortune, and the judgment of the crowd become the measure of your value. And they considered it the single most dangerous way to live, because it meant your inner peace was always one criticism away from collapse. The alternative, the Stoic alternative, is to build your self-worth from the inside out. to ground your identity not in what people think of you, but in what you actually believe about yourself. In your values, in your commitments, in the way you behave when no one is watching. Seneca wrote, "Seek not the approval of men, but the approval of your own conscience." When your conscience, your honest internal assessment of whether you are living with integrity, is the primary measure, then external attacks lose most of their power. An insult is only devastating when it touches a wound. Build inner strength, and you reduce the number of wounds available to touch. This takes work. It requires self-knowledge, actually sitting with yourself and asking hard questions about what you value, who you want to be, and whether you are living in alignment with those answers. It requires you to stop outsourcing your self-evaluation to the nearest available judge. But the reward is a self that cannot be rattled. A self-worth that is not subject to the weather of other people's moods. A core so solid that provocation bounces off it like rain off stone. Rule 10. Silence is the most powerful sentence you can speak. I want to spend some real time on this one, because it goes against almost every instinct modern culture has trained into us. We live in a world that treats response as proof of self-respect. If someone attacks you and you don't respond, the assumption is that you had nothing to say, that you were beaten, embarrassed, cowed. The cultural default is that silence equals weakness. The Stoics believe the opposite, and I think if you examine it honestly, you'll realize they were right. When someone provokes you and you respond, even brilliantly, even with devastating wit, you have revealed something. You have revealed that their words reached you, that they had enough power to compel a reaction from you, that they mattered enough to deserve your energy and your words. But when you say nothing, when you meet aggression with a calm, steady gaze and total silence, you have communicated something far more powerful. You are not significant enough to disturb me. That is not an insult. It is something worse from the provocateur's perspective. It is total indifference. And indifference to someone who attacks others specifically to gain a reaction is the most withering response imaginable. They wanted to move you. They wanted to see that they had the power to create a disturbance in your inner world. Your silence tells them that they don't, and they have to sit with that. There is also a social dynamic here that is worth understanding. When someone makes an aggressive or provocative statement in a public setting, and you respond with silence, not awkward, shrinking silence, but calm, confident silence, the discomfort of that silence does not fall on you. It falls entirely on them. Suddenly, they are the one who said something ugly. They are the one who escalated. And your silence becomes a spotlight on that fact, without you having to say a single word. Seneca wrote that the first step in becoming free is learning which battles are not worth fighting. Not every provocation demands a response. Not every insult deserves an answer. Choosing silence is not choosing defeat. It is choosing what is worth your energy. And most provocations, on honest examination, are not. Rule 11. Use attacks as Stoic practice, not personal offenses. This is a fundamental shift in how you categorize the experience of being provoked, and it is genuinely transformative. Most people, when confronted with an attack, experience it as a personal offense. Something that happened to them, directed at them, about them. And that framing makes it nearly impossible to respond with wisdom. Because now your ego is involved, your identity is under threat, and the rational part of your mind is fighting for airtime, against a flood of emotional reactivity? What if, instead, you experienced it as a Stoic training exercise? The Stoic philosopher Epictetus was fond of using the metaphor of the gymnasium. The gymnasium was where you trained your body. But life, specifically the difficulties of life, was where you trained your character. And just as no serious athlete complains about the weights being heavy, no serious Stoic should complain about circumstances being hard. The hardness is the point. The hardness is what makes you stronger. Reframe every provocation through this lens. Someone is being deliberately cruel to you. That is a perfect opportunity to practice the Stoic virtue of temperance, the capacity to maintain balance and measured response under pressure. Someone is trying to humiliate you publicly. Here is a live test of your equanimity, your inner steadiness. An online troll is doing their best to destabilize you. That is the resistance training of the spirit. This is not about minimizing what is happening. It is about changing what it means. When something is an offense, your job is to defend yourself. When something is a training exercise, your job is to perform well. And performing well, from a Stoic perspective, means maintaining your values, your composure, and your sense of self, regardless of what is being thrown at you. Marcus Aurelius wrote entire pages to himself about this. He would regularly remind himself that the people who frustrated him, annoyed him, tested his patience. They were not impediments to his work as a philosopher. They were his work as a philosopher. Every irritation was a classroom. Every provocation was a curriculum. Start treating yours the same way. Rule 12, see the storm, not the enemy. The final rule is, in many ways, the deepest one. And it requires a kind of philosophical generosity that does not come naturally to most people. When someone provokes you, the automatic response is to see them as a conscious, malicious actor who has deliberately chosen to harm you. And sometimes that's partially true. But the Stoics had a broader view, one rooted in their understanding of human nature and the mechanics of suffering. Every person who acts aggressively toward others is, in some fundamental sense, acting from compulsion rather than free choice. They are being driven by anger, fear, insecurity, pain, or unresolved trauma. They are, in Stoic terms, enslaved to their passions, captive to emotional forces they do not know how to master. Marcus Aurelius used the metaphor of the natural world repeatedly for exactly this reason. He asked himself to see the difficult people in his life, not as enemies to be defeated, but as natural phenomena to be navigated. A storm does not intend to harm you. A flood does not bear you personal malice. They are what they are. Forces that move according to their own logic, indifferent to your feelings about them. When you can extend this same depersonalized view to the human beings who challenge you, when you can see an aggressive colleague as a storm, a critical family member as a flood, a hostile stranger as a strong and sudden wind, you remove the personal sting from the equation. You do not have to excuse their behavior. You do not have to pretend it isn't happening. But you can stop taking it personally. Because a storm doesn't know your name. And here is where Marcus Aurelius's greatest insight lives. This kind of radical depersonalization is not cold. It is not distant. It is actually a form of deep compassion. When you can see the suffering behind someone's aggression, you are seeing them more clearly, more honestly, and more charitably than almost anyone in their life probably does. You are meeting their storm not with a counterstorm, but with stillness. And in the long run, that stillness is the most genuinely human thing you can offer. So let's bring this home. 12 rules. 12 shifts in how you see, interpret, and respond to the people who try to provoke you. You now know that insults are mirrors, not windows. They reveal the speaker, not you. You know that words only carry the power you choose to give them. You know that reacting impulsively is the highest form of surrender, handing your mental sovereignty to someone who hasn't earned it. You've learned the 3-second rule that interrupts the amygdala hijack. You've learned to see provocation not as a threat, but as a live test of the character you are building, and to ground yourself in your breath when the test begins. You understand that your mind is a citadel. Nothing gets in without your permission. The best revenge is to be fundamentally unlike the person who tried to harm you. And your self-worth, when it is genuinely built from the inside, is not subject to the opinions of people who do not have access to your interior life. You've learned that silence is a complete and often devastating response, that you can use every attack as training for the virtue of temperance, and that the people who most try to provoke you are more often than not storms, forces driven by their own pain, asking nothing more of you than to not become a storm yourself. This is Stoicism, not detachment, not cold indifference, but the deliberate cultivation of a self that cannot be rattled, manipulated, or diminished by the chaos of other people's inner lives. Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca. These were not men who lived easy lives. Marcus ruled an empire under plague, war, and betrayal. Epictetus began his life in chains. Seneca navigated one of the most corrupt political environments in human history. And every one of them wrote about the same thing: the untouchable freedom that comes from mastering your inner world. That freedom is available to you, right now. Not someday when your circumstances improve, not when the difficult people in your life finally change. Right now, in the next conversation, the next confrontation, the next moment someone tries to light you on fire. You don't have to burn. If this video gave you something real, share it with someone who needs it. Drop a comment below and tell me, which of these 12 rules hit hardest for you? And if you want to go deeper into Stoic philosophy and how to apply it to modern life, subscribe, because we are just getting started. Stay calm, stay sovereign. I'll see you in the next one.